In a quiet suburb outside Minneapolis, tucked behind rows of nearly identical houses with motion sensor lights and trimmed hedges, lived a couple named Mark and Julia Peterson. They'd been married 12 years, long enough to have rhythm, but not long enough to have forgotten what silence meant. They had 2 kids, both in elementary school, and a golden retriever named Teddy, who barked more than he listened. Mark worked in IT for a logistics company. Julia had gone back to part-time teaching after taking a few years off when the kids were younger. Their life was ordinary, respectable, and, from the outside, enviable. The kind of life that looked whole in photographs, especially around the holidays, with coordinated outfits and matching smiles. People said things like, "You guys are solid," or "You two are lucky you found each other so early." Julia used to nod, smile. Now, she just changed the subject. And in quieter moments, she started to wonder whether what people saw as solid was just sediment. Settled, unmoving, resistant to change. It wasn't that anything had happened. There had been no affair, no financial crisis, no dramatic betrayal or public breakdown. It was just the slow erosion of something she couldn't name. A quiet distance, like living in a house where the walls gently shift overnight, not enough to crack, but enough that you feel the draft, something that unsettles your sleep without ever fully waking you. She started to feel like a guest in her own life, someone temporarily occupying the space, careful not to rearrange too much. They still talked, of course. Who's picking up the kids? Did you pay the gas bill? What time's the parent-teacher meeting? Their conversations were functional, efficient. They ran the household like co-managers, but rarely curious, rarely kind. Julia couldn't remember the last time he asked how she was, not how her day went, but really asked, the way people do when they want to know the truth, not just the summary. She began to answer less out of interest and more out of routine. The dinner happened in early November. Julia had invited 2 other couples from the neighborhood, people they knew well enough to chat with during soccer games and school pickups, but not so well that they wouldn't notice if something was off. She'd planned it weeks in advance. Mark had agreed to it, even helped pick the wine. He mentioned ordering a new corkscrew. They joked about who would clean the bathroom. It had seemed like something, a small project to work on together, like in the early years. But the night before, something changed. He came home later than usual, said his team had run into a server issue. He seemed distracted, then frustrated, then unusually quiet. He skipped dinner and stared at his laptop for hours without really typing anything. Julia watched him from the hallway, unnoticed, and wondered how someone could seem so far away while being just 10 feet from her. By morning, he was back to normal, or close to it. He kissed her on the cheek, said he'd be home by 6. She had already ironed his shirt and left a note in his lunch bag reminding him about the dinner. By 7, he wasn't back. No call, no text. By 8, the other couples had arrived, coats in hand, complimenting the smell of roast chicken and the candles on the table. Julia made excuses. He must be caught up, probably traffic. She refilled wine glasses, laughed at someone's joke about school lunches. She passed the salad bowl, listened to a story about someone's awful in-laws, but her eyes kept drifting to the front door. She smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. He didn't answer her texts. She checked 3 times to make sure she'd sent them. She had. A part of her hoped he would barge in halfway through, flustered and apologetic, but nothing. By 9:30, the guests politely said their goodnights. She handed them foil-wrapped containers of untouched food. Someone patted her shoulder. "Tell him we missed him." At 10:12 p.m., Mark walked in. His coat was still zipped, his face blank. "I forgot," he said. He didn't lie. Didn't say he was stuck in traffic or dealing with work. He just said it plainly. And something in Julia quietly unraveled. Not in a dramatic way. Just a seam loosening, a thread pulling free. The kind of moment that doesn't crash but lingers. They didn't fight. She didn't yell. Instead, she sat down at the table where 6 places had been set and now only 1 plate remained. Hers. She ate a cold potato slowly, watching the candle flicker out. The silence was heavier than any shouting could have been. "You forgot?" She repeated, not with anger, but with something closer to sorrow. "You forgot dinner. Our house. Our friends." He looked at her like he didn't know what she meant. Maybe he didn't. The silence between them stretched, not angry, just long enough for her to realize it wasn't silence at all. It was absence, a kind of emptiness that you can't point to but feel in your bones. She cleaned up alone, went to bed. He followed an hour later. Didn't apologize, didn't explain. He brushed his teeth in the dark. The house felt colder than usual that night. They kept going. Days turned into weeks. Thanksgiving came, then Christmas. They bought gifts, took family photos, posted smiling pictures. They even hosted her sister for New Year's Eve, and no one noticed anything wrong. Or if they did, no one said. They watched fireworks through the window in silence. But something had changed. Not in a way others could see, but in how she moved, how she looked at him. The glances that used to be filled with amusement or shared understanding now passed over him like checking a weather report. She observed him the way one might observe a refrigerator. Functioning, humming, no longer interesting. Once she realized she hadn't touched his hand in over a month. One day in January, she asked if he remembered what they talked about on their first date. He blinked, tried, failed. It was sushi, right? No, she said. It was an Italian place. You made fun of my order. He smiled, sheepish. Sorry, my memory's not what it used to be. She nodded. That's the thing, Mark. It never was. She didn't leave that day, or the week after, but she began writing things down, quietly. A list, not of grievances, but of what she missed. A way to remember herself. Curiosity, laughter, a touch on the back just because, being asked how her day really was, being remembered. She started journaling at night after the kids went to bed. One line a night, sometimes a memory, sometimes a longing. She reread the entries and noticed how few of them included him. She filled pages without using his name. By spring, she had found a rental not far from the kids' school, small but with light and quiet, a place to think, a place where things didn't echo quite so loudly. She bought a plant, hung up a small print she liked. It wasn't much, but it was hers. He was stunned, asked why she hadn't said something sooner, why she hadn't told him how unhappy she was. She wanted to say she had, 1,000 times, just not in words he ever chose to hear. The way she stopped asking him to join her for walks, the way she stopped telling him about the book she was reading, the way she started lingering in the car before coming inside. The silence was a message. It had just gone unopened. They parted without court battles or custody wars. They agreed on the big things. They even hugged when she came by to pick up the kids one Sunday. They became something close to friends, or at least collaborators in the business of parenting. She started calling before dropping them off. He remembered to ask about their allergies. Years later, when people asked what happened, she would say, "It wasn't one thing, it was forgetting, over and over." And they would nod, some with pity, some with understanding, some with fear, and a few, just a few, with recognition. And in her new place, with mismatched mugs and secondhand chairs, she remembered things. Slowly, then all at once, like waking from a dream and realizing you've been sleepwalking for years. She started going on hikes, taking long baths, listening to music in the kitchen while chopping vegetables. She laughed louder, cried more easily. She made tea and let it steep properly. And one night, while brushing her teeth, she caught her own reflection and smiled at it, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally felt awake. Sometimes that was all she needed, and sometimes it was everything. Thank you for listening. Until the next heartbeat in a story, subscribe and stay for more love in every word.